Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to an episode of costumeco. We're doing a live stream tonight, and actually, I haven't this is my first time meeting Casta Hex, but I haven't done a live stream for a while because, as I mentioned to you in my email, I have been taking a little bit of a YouTube break, a little YouTube hiatus. But we're back. We're going to have a special evening tonight. And I also have a new set. So this is kind of exciting. I've been working on my little set. So this is my debut of my set. I have my on-air sign here, which is really fun. We were having a bit of a technical issue because it was like glowing at one point, Casta Hex. So we did a bit of work on that. But anyway, so without much ado, we're going to get started. And just to start with, I just want to introduce to you my guest, Casta Hex, who I met online, not in real life. People are always saying, Heidi, stop meeting people online. That's creepy. But I've met a lot of really great people that way. So
absolutely, always.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us everybody a little bit about yourself and how we came to kind of do this whole thing?
Well, I'm Casta Hex. I am a drag queen. I work in England. I live in Essex, actually, which is the biggest and oldest county in the UK, where all of our English witch trials actually happened, which is why a lot of my drag is quite witchy inspired and historical inspired. I work in costume for film and television. Specifically, I'm an embroiderer and textile artist. And basically, I've been a fan of costumeco for ages, secretly watching all the videos and being like, oh, I actually know about that and different things. So yeah, I dropped in and the rest is, as they say, history.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be fast friends. This is going to be so much fun. So anyway, I just want to say, so we've already got Carl's here. Carl is one of my longtime regulars, and he's always so wonderful. And he's also one of the moderators. He put Casta Hex equals Cast Hex. Actually, before we get going, do you want to tell us a little bit how you got your name?
Yeah, actually, Casta Hex, I always knew I wanted it to be a pun that referenced witchcraft. And there's a Monster High doll line, which is sort of Barbies that are like vampires and demons and, that kind of thing. And there's one called Casta Fierce, and she is sort of a witchy version of Beyonce. And she flies onto stage on a broom and has a microphone that's her microphone stand is a broomstick. And she's quite camp, very green. And I saw that and was like, oh, that's cool. And then I thought, oh, I'd go with spell maybe. But then I thought, actually, in my head, my character is a bit darker. She's a bit more, wicked. So I went with hex because I like that word. I'm a pagan in real life. So, researching the occult and stuff is something I'm familiar with. And the word hex I love because it's short, it's snappy, and it rhymes with sex, which is always quite fun to make puns with.
Absolutely. And, I have to say, next to sci-fi, which is my favorite genre, horror is my next favorite. And the first thing I noticed about you is the symbol on your forehead. It's a pagan symbol, I gather, right?
Actually, I'm not sure because this symbol, I'm a big fan of anything film and television. So I'm a big fan of The Last Kingdom. And this makeup, I thought I'd wear this gown because it's my all embroidered that I did, and this wig I made, and this necklace I made from scratch, everything. So I thought, oh, I'd do something a bit pagan-y, priestessy, and the makeup is actually referencing Skade's makeup from season 2 or 3, I believe.
Oh, okay. Well, it's funny because before we came on, we were talking about symbolism and how much I love symbolism. So I always love when I get to do a deep dive into any kind of, like whether it's runes or, any kind of pagan or Egyptian, hieroglyphs, that type of thing. I always it's such a blast.
Well, I mean, it's really, when I was breaking down the shape, it's really a central sort of full moon shape with another moon underneath and then a sort of blade going through. So it will probably be some stylized version of the goddess symbol. I mean, if you flipped it around and took the line out, it would literally be the pagan god symbol. So they've probably just done something fun in the makeup chair one day that was vaguely runic.
I love it. So I have a little like ticker at the bottom. If you have any questions for Casta Hex, like I have some questions lined up, but if you have any questions that you want to ask her, feel free to put them in the chat and I will bring them up. Okay, so we're just going to get going. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So anyway, when you you sent me an email that was actually, I think we met online first and then you sent me an email,
Hmm.
had a nice chat. And one of the things that you told me, of course, I was totally fascinated with because my background is in theater, but I did a little bit of fashion history or costume history, but that's actually your background, right? So do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My background has always been someone who's been fascinated with costume and costume history. I would sit for hours and read the Janet Arnold Patterns of Fashion books in our school library and like draw from them. Particularly the 18th century, which was always my favorite and is my favorite. Contrary, I mean, the gown I'm wearing tonight is an 18th century gown. It's just a sort of stylized, dark version of one, into the woods kind of vibe. So that was how I started. And then I knew I wanted to be a designer and work in design. So I did a textiles A level and an art A level. I did English literature just to get into sort of the symbolism and the like need for character. And then I took a degree at the Arts University Bournemouth in the UK. It is a fabulous course, and I still go back there and guest tutor sometimes. So yeah, it was really, really fabulous.
Sorry, I had some problems with my buttons.
No worries.
Sometimes we get some technical issues here because I'm
I
doing the
understand.
technical
Don't worry.
part. Okay. So okay, and then from there,
Mhm.
how did you get like a degree? Like, is there like how does
Yes,
it work
it's
in
a
England?
yes. It's a BA honors degree. So yeah, I did kind of spend £9,000 a year to learn how to color in, but you know,
I
um,
know.
yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, yeah. So it's a proper degree.
Okay, so from there, like obviously
Mhm,
you studied, this is your background, and then
mhm,
you got into embroidery and you work in embroidery as your day job in
mhm.
film and TV. So how did that all happen? How did that come about?
Well, in a kind of roundabout way, really, in a bit of a sort of twist of fate, in the words of Olivia Newton-John, way. So I sent an email to the embroidery goddess, Michelle Carragher, years ago, basically just asking for tips and tricks of getting into the industry. And she very kindly sent back an enormous email with lots and lots of tips and tricks. She's incredibly generous with her time, bless her. And she basically, that was that kind of just giving me some tips and that kind of thing. And then we were in our second or third year, and there was a work experience position on the movie The Secret Garden. And my university put a couple of people up for it. Originally, it was only going to be one person that they needed, but in the end, they split it up into 2 or 3 people so that each person could be there for 2 weeks rather than one whole 6 or 8 week chunk
Mhm.
with one person. And I got on the Secret Garden, and as soon as I got in there, I saw a wall of samples with this kind of style of embroidery, like moss work. And I was
Yeah,
like, I know that embroidery anywhere. That's the
I can
character.
show it if should I show it while you're talking about
That's
it a little bit?
that isn't that's my version of it.
Okay, your
The
version
the
of your dress.
embroidery that was on the wall was far more stunning and delicate.
I know what you're talking of because well, I have if you go to Michelle Carragher's website,
Mhm.
she has some samples, I believe, from the Secret Garden there.
Yes.
Now, did she do that after Game of Thrones or did she do it before Game of Thrones?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The Secret Garden, I believe it might have been because I was still at uni. I'm pretty sure the Secret Garden was after all of Game of Thrones, but I might be wrong.
Mhm.
But yeah, so she was just there one day. She just came in, and I was very starstruck, far more starstruck than any actors or actresses I've met, actually.
It's
Um,
funny, right?
yeah, and basically just sort of just spoke to her. I didn't actually bring up the email, so I to this day I'm always like, did she put that together? But I think she has since because we've worked together for quite a few years now. Um, and we worked together for that a couple of days that she was in, and just became friends. She basically said to me, "Oh, when you have your graduation show, let me know, and maybe I'll be able to come down." And I was like, "Oh, she's far too busy. That will never happen." And she did, bless her. She really is such a sweetheart, and couldn't have been more generous. And then yeah, I kind of got my first steps into the industry on the backs of a couple of interviews I didn't get at the end for work experience, and Michelle brought me in on a couple of jobs to assist her early on.
That's amazing. So if anybody doesn't know who we're talking about, Michelle Carragher, she was the principal embroidery artist on Game of Thrones, and she's also doing House of the Dragon, or at least she was. I don't know if you're allowed to tell me if she's continuing to do so.
Yeah, yeah.
And it said there were two others. Were you one of the others? Are you allowed to tell me?
I wasn't on season 1.
Okay.
There was some fabulous ladies working, helping Michelle. Ree was there, and Claire was there, and I believe Kenese was there at various points, doing bits and bobs. Don't quote me on that because I wasn't there on season 1, but just from what I remember having, lunchtime conversations about season 1.
Now, when you talk about the moss, I don't know if you remember this, but the Catelyn Stark, she wears like this collar, and it had, I remember it because it was supposed to be sort of inspired by the water, like her family, or like from, they're from the fish family. So the trout, and River Run. And I remember it having like moss and everything. So that's sort of, when you were saying that, it sort of reminded me of that. And it's almost like is it almost like fiber art? Like, I know you're calling it embroidery, but what would be the...
Yeah,
oh, hey, Tony.
I mean, the specific embroidery that I was referencing when I made this dress was her work on the Children of the Forest, which was
yes, of course,
incredibly delicate. It is somewhat more fibery, but there's an awful lot of stitch that goes into it to sort of feather things out and sort of change things, shall we say, and add different tonalities and three-dimensionalities of little sort of almost semi-small bushes and ferns sort of growing off that is thread work. Yeah, so it's a kind of mix of laying down different things, but it's a bit more, in some ways it's a bit more like needle felt involved. There's kind of slight felting techniques involved.
I love that. Actually, we haven't actually addressed this, really, is that Natural Selection says, Casta, thanks for doing this interview in full drag. You look amazing. And you do. You look so beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Hey, so before we go on to the other questions, one of the things I was thinking about as I was getting ready, how long, I mean, I'm sure it's different depending on what kind of costume you are wearing, but how long does it typically take you to get ready?
Well, a lot of what I wear, especially nowadays, is more historically accurate. This outfit I really just wore because it's my most embroidered outfit. But what I traditionally wear now is very historically accurate. It still features a lot of embroidery or like annoying, obnoxious, like miles of ruffles and rouleau trim and, those kind of things. Yeah, fabulous. There's loads of like handmade, whip gathered trim all along these outfits. That one's embroidered. All the flowers on that are made by hand. All the berries are made by hand. So the makeup is quite soft for those. The makeup, I'd say, takes about 2 hours, and then lacing into stays and petticoats and stockings and shoes and wigs, that takes about another hour and a half. That gown, my Versailles gown, I think from start to completely done, it took about 3 and a bit hours to get into that. But there's a great deal of jewelry and like pinning feathers in for that specific gown. So anywhere from about 1 hour and 3/4 to about 3.5, depending on the understructures involved and the actual makeup. I mean, this makeup is quite sort of soft. This eye is quite simple. There's only a few colors involved in it. So this was reasonably quick.
Yeah, and actually, I think I saw you doing on your speaking of putting on your makeup, you do a lot of like on Instagram and I think TikTok, you do a lot of like sort of demonstrations how you put your makeup on and everything.
Yeah.
So and I have put your socials down in the description. So if anybody I encourage everyone to go over there and follow you.
I'd be very grateful. I am on the road to my 5th time applying for RuPaul's Drag Race UK. So any and all followers and support I can get would mean the world to me.
Well, I'll write a letter of recommendation if that would be helpful.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure.
I don't think it will help though. Hey, this is a great question from Carl. He says,
Mhm.
what makes embroidery different from sewing? I think that's a really great question.
Um, to be honest, I kind of approach every project very individually in terms of like not a job, in terms of literally projects. So to me, sewing and embroidery are literally kind of the same. It depends on what you're embroidering, I suppose. If you're doing kind of like a blanket stitch or that kind of thing that is also used for structure, or herringbone and that kind of thing, um, that is pretty the same. But if you're doing like oodles of French knots or like rouleau or soutache or anything three-dimensional, that is very, very different. So yeah, I suppose they're parallel lines. They use the same tools, but they don't. They cross in some places, but not others. Just like a train track, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a really good definition. And embroidery, I mean, it's that extra little bit of something, it gives it that extra polish. Like
Yes,
for
yeah.
instance, in your photos here, you could have done these roses, or sorry, strawberries, and you could have
Mhm.
painted them or something, but you decided to embroider them because that just adds that little bit of extra to
Yeah.
it.
Well,
Here's the
I
hat as
couldn't.
well.
Well, I mean, the hat I made and was like, oh, maybe I'll buy the flowers. But I thought, you can't really get nice strawberry looking flowers. Strawberry flowers are very specific, very simple, very specific. And the strawberries, you
Sorry.
can't get nice millinery strawberries. So I had to just make it all myself. And then when I'm going to that much effort for the hat, I don't want the hat to be so much detailed and then the rest of it be flat. I did toy originally with using a striped red and ivory fabric on the collar detail and the cuff, but in the end I just did traditional embroidery. There's a bunch of threads wrapped around each other for the stems, and the flowers are satin stitch, but the actual strawberries are an applique piece of the same red velvet that the jacket is made from, that is held down by sort of a crisscross lattice of red thread held down with yellow to get the seed in.
Yeah, it's always hard to tell, like from photos. Like this is the one thing that's really frustrating sometimes about TV and film, especially if it's dark, which is like,
Mm.
you've probably, if you've watched any of my videos, I go on about that a lot. But
Yeah.
you can't see. Sometimes you can't see it. And you must be like, it must be so hard when you watch a show that you've worked so hard on, and then you're like, oh, you can't see my
It
work.
I mean, it's always a case. I mean, when I watched The Peripheral, having worked quite extensively on that, I worked very heavily on this one sort of load of scenes for this party and doing some really fabulous detailed things. And then when I watched the show, all of my outfits that I worked on were miles in the background, in half light, in groups of people that were obscured by other people. And then the few things I did like quite quickly over a lunch break, say, or something, were the things that were in close up. So but
It's always the way. It's
mm,
always the way. I remember
absolutely.
like reading like Tommy Dunn, who I think he was the weapons master on Game of Thrones. He said oftentimes he just like, he would have all these rubber weapons, but he got to the point where he's like, I have to make sure that they look real because I'll give it to someone deep background, and the next thing I know, that guy is being featured. So,
Yeah.
it's a really hard balance. And Tony says he loves that show. Tony's got a great channel, by the way, everybody. I would encourage you all to go check it out. He says he loved Peripheral. He's asking if you're working on season 2 of that.
I am not. I'm currently on another project. I don't really, when I'm on a project, that's all I can think of, to be honest. Like I get so into the world that I'm in, that I get a bit absorbed. So unfortunately, I'm not. I'm on a different project currently. Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't even know if I saw if there's a season 2. I really hope so because it
No,
is a really great show.
I'm not sure. I must admit I haven't finished watching it myself. Sci-fi is fabulous, but it's not my sort of raison d'etre, shall we say. So I will finish it. I will finish it.
If you haven't seen From, by the way, you have to watch that. And Tony has an amazing breakdown on that show. Have you watched the show From?
No,
It's
I've
a
not heard of it.
Oh my God, you have to watch it. It's so good, Tony. Yeah, it's amazing. And the costumes are really good too. They're really fun.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
encourage you. So let's go on with the questions because we're like, okay, I'm already like, we're just going off on a tangent like I typically do.
No
All
worries.
right. So we talked a little bit about the film. Now, like one of the reasons why the impetus for you contacting me is, unfortunately, there's this whole strike going on in North America, and but now I've been hearing whispers that over in the UK, there's still some productions going on. So has this affected you, or are you technically not working at the moment, or have you been able to
Yes,
continue?
I'm what I call fun employed at the minute. So I am just working on personal projects. I'm dedicating some time to my Drag Race tape and making some gowns for myself. I was on a production, and unfortunately, we had to stop because it's an Apple TV production,
Mm.
and a lot of the leads are American, so they are either part of SAG-AFTRA or their
Yeah.
agents and people advise them, I believe, I imagine, to stand with them, and the whole production has sort of stopped. Quite a lot of productions in the UK have stopped. Basically, anything that's got either American actors or a lot of American funding um, has been pulled. But some things that either, I suppose, they really want to get out um, are continuing or are finishing up, or at least working a bit longer and then finishing.
Hmm. Tony wants to know, now, is it Tania Miller? Now I don't think you worked with her because on the
Linnea,
peripheral, Tania. How do I say?
ooh,
She,
not sure.
um, she's like, I think she's the main female villain. Tony, you can correct me if I'm wrong in peripheral, but she's the one who wears these amazing long coats
Oh,
that swing around, and she's got these cool sleeves and everything.
I did a couple of pieces, but they were very. It wasn't meant to call attention to itself. My
Hmm.
friend Verity Finney Green, who is an incredible weaver and fabric manipulator, she works in most areas of costume, but that's her like bailiwick. She wove this incredible range of textured fabrics for that show, and mainly the villain, sort of things that looked somehow reptilian, but somehow like half remembered reptiles and circuit boards all fused out of like latex and wire and different things. And there were a lot of costumes, well, there are a few, the seams in it, Michelle Clapton didn't want the seams to be as either evident or to not have any, if that makes sense. So it looked like one
Yes.
continuous piece. So then my job was to use some of the threads that Verity had woven with and sort of work into the pattern and sort of crisscross over to sort of obscure the seams in certain places.
Yeah, Tony. So I think you came in a little bit late, but we were quickly chatting that Michelle Clapton, who is Game of Thrones costume designer, is working on Peripheral, but also Casta Hex also worked with her on The Nevers, which was another one of my husband's favorite shows, and The Secret Garden. Now, The Secret Garden, I didn't see it. Like, where did that air? Was that on
I,
Apple
I
TV?
mean, I believe it came out in cinemas. I forget what streaming service it's on now. I mean, I only watched it like once or twice, if I'm
Hmm.
honest. And I was literally there for 2 weeks work experience. So I helped with a little bit of screen printing, a tiny bit of embroidery that I don't think uh, was like, sort of, I think it was more sort of just sort of getting my eye in, just sort of learning a bit. And then just like general workroom help, sort of a lot of herringboning and slip stitching and, you know, delivering packages to makers and picking stuff up. It's
Yes, yes,
quite a
I know.
simple
A lot
job.
of the grunt work when
Mm-mm.
you're beginning. Now, so okay, so we know that this is what you do for a living in the day, but like, so how did you get into drag though? How did that all come about? And also, like, I mean, I guess like I asked you earlier before we got on, please correct me if I have any of the terminology incorrect, but in the drag world, is it sort of part and parcel that you make your own clothes? Like,
Um,
are there some drag artists who will have somebody else make their clothes for them, or is it sort of like, is this part of the whole process, doing
mhm.
the makeup, doing the wig, doing the
well,
costume?
I mean, it varies artist to artist. I got into drag because I love to perform. I do musical theatre, so I lip sync to things like Hamilton or Into the Woods. I do a lot. Sweeney Todd. I sing as well, um, and I act and I do celebrity impersonations and mimicry quite extensively. So all of my costumes are very specific to what I'm doing. They're not sort of a general like sexy thing or a dance thing. So when I started drag, I actually didn't really sew. I'd done my degree, but my degree specialized in design, not sewing. So when I started drag and realized very quickly that I wanted my drag to be somewhere between fairy tale villainess and 18th century madam, I sort of was like, right, I need to learn how to sew properly. And then just started by making bum rolls, stays, shifts, hats, and working my way up to gowns and just practicing every era and every sewing pattern I could get my hands on until I got better. A lot of drag artists don't make their own things. I think most buy things. And the way that Dragrace has influenced the world, unfortunately, in some ways, is that drag now has become, I think, sometimes reliant on sex appeal and youth and beauty. Which often means wearing very skimpy things or next to nothing or things that you can buy online. So yeah, it does vary, but yeah, I think most don't make their own things. I mean, I did this hair. I don't do all of my hair. A lot of my 18th century stuff, I go to theatre makers who are far more experienced with. But virtually every single piece of jewelry, even like these earrings, little dried acorns.
Oh yeah, here, let me profile you there so you can see.
These little earrings,
Oh,
little
I love
dried
them.
acorns, and this little
Yes.
talisman is a little sculpted thing with sort of moth and
And again,
honeydew on.
you've got the markings, the runes sort of on there.
And I've got a bird's nest in my hair.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, there's a lot of details in my work, but that's just because I'm a detail whore. So
yeah, because one of the things I remember, one of my first experiences, like I said, I have been to a live drag show. I used to go to them. And then of course, like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert was like one of my very first experiences. And that's why I was asking, because in that show, one of the characters is the one sort of who makes all the clothes. Like he's just sort of, or she is the one who does all of the, comes up with these crazy outfits, like sewing together sandals to make dresses or things like that.
Yeah. I think that was definitely more of a part of drag in the older times of drag, shall we say, like the 60s and 70s, where it was a lot about like Vogue ball cultures in like Brooklyn and Harlem and places, where it was very much about make something fabulous and Madonna-esque with what you have, which was often not a lot, because obviously the queer community is often the minority and the marginalized, so oftentimes you don't have access to incredible amounts of money, so they would make these fabulous things out of next to nothing and wear them for the benefit of everyone else, the queer community. So yeah, that's more of a sort of callback to the sort of older generation, shall we say, who were forced to make things from scratch, even if they didn't know how to, just so they could do drag. But nowadays, most people just go to the same sort of handful of designers who know how to work with drag artists and just make me that this one drag queen wore, but in black latex or, pink spandex. That's kind of how it goes.
Now, like, is there ever a crossover between the drag community and the cosplay community? Because, in cosplay, you do see like gender bending and that type of thing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that was actually how I started drag. My first foray into drag was doing Winifred Sanderson from Hocus Pocus, which I recently remade. So
I saw your pictures on Instagram.
So if you're interested in that, go have a look at my Instagram. It was probably the most detailed costume I've ever made. So yeah, there's quite a lot of crossover. I mean, a lot of drag artists will do a quote unquote cosplay for the sake of a performance. I mean, last year at Halloween, everyone and their wife was doing Megan, that like haunted killer doll. A few years before that, everyone was the Countess from American Horror Story and wearing a white sort of sheer gown and a blood red and a glove. It definitely does go in trends. Everyone's Barbie at the minute, literally.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
So
yeah, or like I was thinking like Wednesday, the show Wednesday would also.
Oh, everyone was doing Morticia and Wednesday.
Morticia.
I did Morticia for a bit.
But that must be really fun. Like, so do because I know that cosplayers have conventions that they get to go to. Is there some type of celebration like that for you?
Yeah, there is. DragCon is a thing. Yeah, it's very much, you can, you wear your most flamboyant outfits really, because you're not performing, you're just swanning around all day, and people are taking photos with you. And now that I've been in the community for quite a while, I know pretty much everyone. So it's kind of like a big sort of workman's outing, if you like, where you're just like, oh, hey, you know, it's kind of just when you get to see all of your drag friends from Scotland, you know, parts of England that you don't live in or go to, you know, it's just a big holiday sometimes, you know.
So now, what is the process like to apply for RuPaul's Drag Race? Or like, there's a UK version, I think. Is that correct? Or is it just
Yeah,
Drag Race?
it's quite rigorous and horrific, involving a 15-minute tape with 2 celebrity impersonations, 8 to 10 runways, an acting section, a talent section, a 3-minute interview with 20 questions, 2 different lip syncs, one of them to a RuPaul song, one to a song of your choice. And then you make this whole tape, go to all of this effort, you know, carve your soul out and huck it into the universe, and then either you get contacted or you just never hear anything. So it's kind of a stressful and somewhat soul destroying process.
Absolutely. And like, because we were talking about, are there shows like that? Are they non-union? Like is it a non-union sort of type set, like being a reality show?
Reality TV and scripted TV are slightly different in that the reason the strikes have all happened is because the X amount of years that the scripted TV show was signed on for ran out, and they needed their contracts all renewed, if you like. But reality TV is on a different one, and I believe theirs isn't coming up for another year and a half or a year. So reality TV is kind of different in how it's actually put together.
Mhm. So when, have you done the application? Are you in the process of doing the application?
Um,
Where are you at?
the application normally it happens in October, but last year it started in September, so all of us were like madly unprepared. So I'm assuming it will happen in September again, so I'm just pre-filming odd things, doing a load of runways and photo shoots to try and get a variety of looks in. So I'm dipping my toes in, shall we say, before it officially starts.
I've got a really great question. Now I'm not sure if it's Lean or Leanne. Is it difficult to source your equipment and materials that you work with, or do you find yourself having to improvise?
Um, It very much depends. If I know exactly what I want, I made a gown recently that was sort of a Morgana from Merlin-esque thing,
Oh, love it.
where I used the beetle wings, like the Thai beetle wings. When I want a specific thing, I'll have a look on Etsy. I'll trawl, you know, hand and lock different places. The Golden Hind is great for gold work supplies and like metal spangles and metal sequins. So I'll have a look on them. Yeah, so for some things it's very specific, but sometimes you're on a job and the designer will come over and say, "Oh, this costume's randomly come up and we need something," and I'll just have to literally chuck something together based on what either I've got or other people in the workroom have got, or that they can buy me sort of that day, you know, sometimes. So it does vary.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So now I know, you were saying comparing some of the more contemporary, I don't know how, if you would call it a contemporary drag artist versus a historical. Like,
Mhm.
is there a different community for you? Like, or like the fact that
Um,
you do more historically inspired costumes?
Well, to be honest, there's not really anyone quite like me, shall we say.
You're one
So,
of a kind. I
so
love that.
which is a blessing and a curse. So
Yes.
in some ways, yeah, there's a slightly more alternative scene where people are a bit more punk rock or do a bit more horror-y or a bit more anime inspired, shall we say, that's more sort of East London based, or people will have beards, but everything else is incredibly glam. My friend Taylor Trash has a full beard, but is like a Southern Belle, like American sort of trailer trash rock chick energy.
That's
Um,
hilarious.
that's fabulous.
Yeah.
But then there is the sort of Soho scene, which is all incredibly attractive guys who are about this fat, um,
Yeah.
with
Hmm.
six packs and just wear a long hair and an incredibly glamorous makeup with their lovely little tiny noses and chiseled faces and, you know, Botox up to the eyebrows. So, yeah, there's definitely different scenes happening.
Yeah. So for you then, like what are some of your favorite, like I know 18th century, I think you were saying, or 17th
Mhm.
century, 18th century, uh,
Yeah.
like 1750 or like, Marie Antoinette, like
Well,
what's sort of your favorite?
I think I appreciate something from every era. Um, I've recently fallen in love with the 1830s after watching Gentleman Jack and how beautiful their costumes are. So I've recently fallen in love with that. Um, but I think my favorite, I like 15th century, but specifically Spanish and Italian 15th century with the huge cape sleeves and very high neck. That's
Hmm.
incredibly glamorous. I like I love all of the 18th century, but particularly 1770 to 1790. I like the sort of more polonaise style, the more pastoral than the sackback. I do love the sackback, and when I wore one at Versailles, I did feel incredibly glamorous.
Do we have a picture of that one? Is that
That's
the
the green gown with the orange hair.
there? Oh,
Yeah,
here.
that
So let
one.
me put it on you so that it
So
doesn't, so
that's
it's
that's a
there.
full sackback.
Amazing. Do you want to
And
explain what a sackback is in case anybody doesn't
Mhm.
know what they probably don't?
A sackback is a type of gown that was popularized in 1750 by Madame de Pompadour and her ladies. It involves Watteau draping a piece of fabric at the back, so it creates a long extended cape that drapes from the shoulders that is
Mhm.
cut into the side pieces, which are draped up. It was done, I think, really to preserve a large piece of fabric so that it could then be recut into different styles later because fabric was so prohibitively
Mhm.
expensive for most people. It creates an incredibly elegant shape, and there is a shorter version which is called a péton l'air, which was literally invented by Madame de Pompadour. And yeah. So it's
As
a
opposed to an English gown, which is
Mhm.
it's sewn down. So
Yeah, fitted. Yeah,
it's so cool though because it's like you've kind of got like it's like you've got the cape, you've got the gown, you've got it all. Like you don't need to have a separate cape.
I must admit, I've worn pretty much something from every era.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the 1890s as well, the 1880s.
Oh, yeah.
I love, yeah,
Puff sleeves, no puff
I,
sleeves.
I love the 1890s.
Yeah.
I'm actually making an 1890s evening gown at the minute, out of some fabric I got from Bridgerton when I left as a sort of little leaving present. Um,
Mhm.
so I will be doing that. But yeah, there was something very special. I didn't think anything could beat a polonaise or ruched up, which is my favorite silhouette. But when I
Me
was,
too.
but
Mine
when I
too.
was, but when I was sort of sweeping the halls of, literally where Marie Antoinette and Louis lived, which was so incredible. It was very fabulous having that cape drape in the back, sort of
Mhm.
wafting behind.
Now, I think this fabric is sort of it, is it like a watery silk or is it
It's it's an ombre.
an
It's a
ombre?
stripe that
Sure.
goes from olive green into brown into a sort of fleshy salmon color that looks like a
Hmm.
Marie Rose sauce from a prawn cocktail. And then on the actual divide between the stripes, there is embroidery, or it's more like a weave actually. It's like
Hmm.
woven, very thin platinum floral scrolling effect, and then the under taffeta is just a plain shot
Yeah,
taffeta that's olive and gold.
which is my favorite. Shot is my favorite. In case anybody
Yeah.
doesn't know, it's like two tone, like the
Mhm,
weave and
mhm.
the weft are two different
Yeah,
colors.
it
Absolutely love it.
really that fabric sings particularly on 18th century because of all of
Hmm.
the gathers and the pleats on things. It just lets the light play on it in a really fabulous way. I think it makes it look very expensive.
Now, question for you: a lot of cosplayers I've spoken to, they don't like using natural fabrics. They prefer synthetics.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Well, that entire gown from Versailles is
Mm.
synthetic.
Okay, so
None of that is real.
and the reason
It's
why, well, I guess first of all, it's way more expensive. I gather, like I don't know how many yards went into that.
Well, there's I actually did buy that fabric from America, which was expensive to ship. I think in the end that whole gown in terms of fabric costs probably about £350. So not that much in terms of the fabric. Um, but some of that fabric was donated to me. I'm very luckily a fabric ambassador for Minerva Crafts, who are a UK fabric website who make incredible fabric one of the leading suppliers in this country, actually.
Mhm.
So very luckily, I work with them, and they supplied the shot under things. All of my underpinnings were real linen, and actually my stays were real silk that I'd bought from Fancy Styles fabric in the States as well.
Mhm.
So if that was real silk, that would have been 3 times what it was a meter, easily,
Yeah.
if not 4 or 5. But I also, being a man, I know it's hard to believe, but being a man, I sweat quite a lot. So if I wear a natural silk, I don't want it to stain. I don't want it to watermark. So I find synthetics are sometimes better. However, for a polonaise skirt, I always insist on real silk because it does just create a more crisp, sort of more exaggerated silhouette, because synthetics are a bit heavier and a bit less crisp, so they droop slightly more.
Uh, yeah, and also has that really nice rustle, that rustle sound.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Natural is she's saying she hopes she doesn't she hopes she doesn't trigger me because my nemesis is the costume designer on the Murdoch Mysteries. So, I don't know if everyone has a nemesis. I have a nemesis, and we've been nemesis for like decades. It's one of those things. And so I think last time I was on, I mentioned that, and she remembered somehow. But she says that she says the 1890s is my favorite fashion era. I think it's because I really like Murdoch Mysteries and Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of
Which
Green Gables, I think, had the remake at
the
least.
remake, yeah.
Had
Anne with an
some
E. Anne with an E.
had
Is that what you're talking
yeah,
about, natural
yeah,
selection?
Anne
Anne
with
with
an
an
E,
E?
yeah. Had some fabulous breakdown and
Mhm.
fabulous like character driven costumes, like where things are too tight and like splitting kind of. I mean, they're all basically similar farm dresses, but I thought
Mhm.
the footwear I thought was particularly impressive. They'd clearly done their research on footwear. And there were some more flamboyant moments, like when she goes to the party that's run by the aunt who's a lesbian. So
I
there's
love
some
that.
sort of
Yeah.
fabulous, literally drag, like turn of the century drag in that, which
Mhm.
appealed to me.
I actually bought Anne's wreath at an auction. She has that little floral wreath she
Oh,
wears.
from that party scene.
Yeah, from the party scene, I bought
That's
it and a parasol.
fabulous.
But then, so I was talking about it in another live stream I did, and I got an email from another fellow viewer
Mhm.
who actually bought most of the costumes from that. So hopefully, in a future video, we'll chat with him.
Oh, amazing.
He's bought all kinds of things. Like I was like, he wants to open up a museum.
Mhm.
And this is something about because I think how it came up was we were talking. I had an interview with Prop Store, and we're like, where do these costumes go? Like after, like I
Mhm.
mean, unless they're going on tour or something, oftentimes they get sold off an auction or they get bought up by collectors. So
Mhm.
I love that because it's just like it makes me so sad to think that these costumes would end up in like the trash bin or
No, I mean, in my experience, things don't get thrown away unless it's been like covered in fake blood or used for stunts
Mhm.
or like burned beyond recognition or something like that. Generally, at the end of a production, especially if it's a period piece, there's no stylization. The big hire houses want them for stock for then like using to hire out to future productions. So generally, everything goes back to sort of hire houses at the end of jobs. Or if it's a long running show, then the production will hire a storage facility to store everything. Or like Game of Thrones, everything goes on tour, or Harry Potter is all on tour, and in the studio tour here in Watford. So yeah, things rarely get thrown away. I mean, sometimes pieces of jewelry, like people from who worked on the show, will say, "Oh, when I leave, I want that thing," and like sometimes people, get little souvenirs. Sometimes they don't. It varies.
Or sometimes, you hear this, the cast well, oftentimes I'm sure they ask for it, but sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I stole
Yeah.
this piece," but I'm sure that they were
I
allowed to
mean,
take
yeah,
it.
I've never heard. I mean, I know on Harry Potter they had quite a thing with the wands and like all of the supporting extras wanting to keep their wands and like stealing them over lunch breaks and things. And I know that Glenn Close has it written into all of her contracts that she gets to keep all of her costumes. So she's got all of the costumes from Cruella, which
Amazing.
she has on display in her local costume course sort of lobby. So it varies. I think it's rare that people take whole things. You know, it's generally a smaller thing. I know Daniel Radcliffe has his glasses, for instance, from Harry Potter. It's that kind of smaller thing.
That's it's very intimate. It's an intimate item.
Because ultimately they are a production's like asset. You know, they've spent money on our time to make them and all the fabrics. So, you know, they don't often let anyone get away with things, you know.
Yeah. Lean has another question. Do you find inspiration in your designs and costumes from other cultures outside the UK and Europe? Like, that's a really great question.
Yes and no. It's a difficult time, I think, to be a designer because of specifically cultural appropriation arguments and things like that can stifle creativity. I do think there is a difference between appreciation and appropriation. I think you can do things in an intelligent, careful way. I think in terms of other cultures, a lot of my references are European. That's just my wheelhouse, shall we say. But every culture has fabulous things. I mean, I often wish that I could wear Indian Shawani coats, for instance, as formal wear, because their shape is so much more elegant than Western men's formal wear. Saris are fabulous. As like an embroiderer and bead artist, I'm obsessed always with beautiful saris. And when King Charles was coronated, I was very more excited by all of the African dignitaries' outfits that were in fabulous like wax resist prints and like huge sculptural turbans and headpieces. I thought they easily outshone all of the Western fashion. So I'm obsessed with a lot of different cultures' fashion, but I don't always necessarily draw on them myself.
I thought that was a really great question, though. So now I've showed a few of the pictures that you sent me, but do you have a few costumes that you've made over the past several years that are just like your absolute favorite, or even is there one that you made that was like a nightmare that you want to share? Or
yeah, I think this is one of my favorites just because every part of this is like embroidered and covered in like three-dimensional things, which is one of the reasons I wore it. I think I'm going
to show some of the in case people came in late.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the embroidery?
Yeah, I mean, the leaves are like silk cut work with paint and beading and embroidery on to create the vines, and then all of the sort of three-dimensional roots are needle felt with embroidery, with heat gunning, with paint work. The 3D sort of lichen is needle felt with embroidery and beading, and then the moss is sort of reindeer moss, it's embroidery, it's wool, it's different things all sort of opened up. There's a lot of paintwork and breakdown that sort of informed the shape of everything. I did the paintwork first, and then there's a great deal, you can't see it in the photos, but in real life it really glimmers because it's got covered with hundreds of tiny clear beads that look like dew clinging in the moss.
Well, I saw it looks like there's a few here. Sort of just sitting like little clusters.
Yeah,
is that them?
They're larger.
Okay.
Beads. There's some labradorite faceted beads, and also some plastic ones that look like soap bubbles that I painted black to look maybe like spider's eggs or something that's been laid on. And then the butterflies are embroidery on organza for the wings, and then the bodies are needle felt again with Swarovski crystals for eyes and lucite cord for antennae.
So beautiful. There's little patches. Are they supposed to be like mushrooms or?
Yeah, they're like little mushrooms, fungi, lichen.
I love it.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. The moss, it's incredible. It looks just like moss. Like it's crazy. I'm sure in person, if you looked up really close, but just in these pictures, doesn't it look like moss?
Thank you. No, it is a fabulous technique. I think even in person, it looks pretty genuine. I often take it to my teaching classes that I teach, and I'll put it on a mannequin, and everyone just wants to touch it. It's very textural costume.
Lean enjoyed your answers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Carl. I appreciate that. Sometimes I tease Carl. I tell him to get in the house. I don't know if you watch, if you ever watch The Walking Dead.
Yes,
I
yeah.
tell Carl to get in the house sometimes because I'm teasing
That
him.
is hilarious. Oh God,
And
that was
Mara
such a
J
sad
says,
show.
yeah, it is. Amara J says, lovely. So anyway, okay, I just have a few other questions for you. We're like strumming along here so quickly. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Like as I was saying to you, even before we started, perhaps, you'll come back and we can do another,
Always, yeah, I'd love that.
it would be so fun, especially because like I said, I'm, as everyone I've mentioned, I've just having a little bit of some, downtime with my family. And then hopefully we'll be getting back to doing some more videos and live streams in the fall. So we'll have to have you back if you're available.
I'd love that. Yeah, always.
And you can either dress up or not dress up. It will be totally up to you what you want to do.
We'll see. If I'm on a job, I won't be dressed up. If
I'm happy to have you either way. Okay.
Thank you so much.
A couple more questions. So now I know we were saying that you don't technically necessarily take inspiration from, sorry, not from historical, but from other cultures. But where do you get your inspiration? Like, do you have a Pinterest board? Like, do you have like mood boards? Like, sorry, I'm old fashioned.
Yeah, I do Pinterest virtually every new project. And sometimes if it's a TV project, I'll have one board that's a general flavor for the whole show and then one for each character, just for initial jumping off points. And often designers will like link you to theirs so you can just see what they're thinking and as they add to it,
Yes.
I do mood board and I do sketch. I actually am very fastidious about sketching everything with watercolor and putting the swatches on. Traditionally, I'm quite a traditionalist in how I design, so I will always do that.
Do you want to tell everybody what a mood board is? I did an interview with one of the costume designers, and I asked her just to sort of describe what it is. I mean, obviously, because you work in the business and everything, but maybe let everyone know what that is.
A mood board is like an initial. It's like a lobster tank of ideas, if you like. It's like all of your key captive ideas in one place that you then can pull the specific ones from for a costume or for a specific piece. I think every job I've ever been on, there's mood boards basically covering in every inch of the wall, and it'll be like, oh, that's for this character, or oh, that's for this location, or that's for this thing. And they're snippets of other people's artwork, color palettes. Sometimes they're a really random photo that has nothing to do with anything, but the designer likes the shape of someone's shoe heel or just the mood it evokes. So it's kind of like a visual. I think a lobster tank is a good description. It's like a captive audience of all of your ideas in one place that you can pull from.
Yeah, and then with Pinterest, you can just sort of grab things from the net. I know there's some new tools. Like in my off time, I like watching design videos, not costume design, but just like interior design. And I've seen some, there's some designers, like interior designers, who they have some different tools that they use. But you could just do it on a piece of, like you could do it on a Bristol board, if you wanted to.
That's what they are generally on film and television. They're like
cutting it out of magazines,
giant. They're like things that we find on Pinterest board, and then print like the key things. I always print the sort of key images to have on my wall. I like to sort of enrobe my working area with the sort of the world we're in, and I go to the effort, especially on things like My Lady Jane, where it was Tudor, of like listening to Tudor music and like getting very into the world and the headspace. And in fact, it even got to a point where I got obsessed with Tudor history podcasts and then made a bunch of Tudor food from original recipes because I was like just obsessed.
There's actually my husband watches a YouTuber who does, I think it's called,
guy.
It's a guy.
He's very, very attractive.
He is, and he does like recreations of like medieval foods and drinks and things like that.
He did a series on recreating the menus from the Titanic, each class, and it was really fabulous. I forget.
That's so cool.
Is it Tasting History?
Tasting History, that's it. It's a really good show. Anyway, if anyone wants to check it out. But anyway, so it's fun to watch and learn and see these other types of like how, you know, and also his interpretation of it, because sometimes it's like, well, we don't have that. I have to sort of figure out something
Yes.
that's a close, you know, second to it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's something I have to deal with a lot as like a pagan as well. Like I read like medieval spells or incantations and recipes, and I'm like, well, what is that thing?
Mhm.
Because folk names for plants vary so much depending on century, location, like what they had available. So it is crazy sifting through the like weird obscure names for like ginger, or you know, it's
Yeah.
quite fun.
We have a few more questions. So Tony asks, Tony says, if you could work with one designer and one actor, who would that be and why? And it says any time period. So just
Okay.
I'm assuming you mean living or dead.
Okay. If I could work with if I could work with any designer, I think I'd like to work with Milena Canonero.
Oh.
She's fabulous. Like her designs are always incredible. Or maybe Gabriella Pascucci. She's fabulous. She did Penny Dreadful, which was fabulous. Or also maybe Kate.
I think she did Age of Innocence as well.
Mhm, mhm.
Actually, Justin, if you're here,
Or
I think Justin, there's a show that Justin watches that she did. I can't think of it off. Maybe not the
or
Tudors.
or possibly Kate Hawley, who did Crimson Peak.
Oh yeah.
She's I like, you know, anyone that will want to work with me, I will I will happily work with. I think actors are a bit more specific. I'd love to work with very sadly I won't ever get to now, but I'd love to have worked with Helen McCrory. I thought she was fabulous.
Yes.
And a lot of my friends who knew her from working with her said she was literally the kindest woman ever. So her loss is quite deeply felt this side of the pond. Other
And she
actors,
was on Penny Dread. She was in Penny Dreadful, if I recall.
she was
right?
Narcissa Malfoy in
Yeah,
Harry Potter.
so great. Yes, of course.
She's
Yes.
Peaky Blinders. She's Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of people you hear like stories about whether or not they're good or bad. So like I have an idea of a lot of the people. I'd love to work with Helena Bonham Carter, Imelda Staunton. Male actors I don't vibe with as much unless I find them attractive, and like finding someone attractive isn't a good reason to want to work with them because that's going to lead to like HR complaints.
Yes. Oh, I know what you're saying. Now,
Yeah.
I think because you're doing like, is it Lady Jane? Are they doing a remount of that?
Yeah, it's not a remount. It's based on a book called My Lady Jane, which, without giving too much away, is set in a world where it's not set to the backdrop of the war between Catholicism and Protestantism. It's set between a war between people who can turn into animals and people who can't turn into animals. So it's the story of Lady Jane Grey told through quite a youthful, almost sort of Sophia Coppola, Marie Antoinette sort of youthful vibe with like modern music and irreverent edit style. So it's going to be quite fun, I think, quite campy.
Well, I was asking is I think Helena Bonham Carter, we were just speaking of, I think she played Lady Jane in the older version.
She did, yes.
With Carrie Elwes.
Yes.
I remember watching that. I'm like, oh my God, we got Carrie Elwes from The Princess Bride.
Carrie Elwes in Princess Bride is how I realized I was gay. Like,
oh my gosh,
like,
absolutely.
The most attractive man who has ever graced the planet. And like my brother was like, oh, Princess Buttercup is so beautiful. And I was like, no. Yeah. Obviously I didn't say this at the time because I was like, what, 12 or something. But
now who is playing Lady Jane? Is it I felt like it was the girl from
Emily Bader, I believe.
Emily Bader. Okay. And we'll have to keep an eye out for that.
She has done a lot of, she's American. She has done a lot of, she did one of the later Paranormal Activity movies. She's done a lot of horror. So seeing her be a sort of campy Hermione Granger-esque Belle from Beauty and the Beast-esque sort of bookworm, feisty sort of, you know, character will be interesting. I didn't see a lot of her performances on set or anything, but I think she's going to do a great job, and she's stunningly beautiful, and she's incredibly gracious and sweet as a human, and she wore the clothes very well. So I've got a lot of good things, I think, for that show.
That's true, Carl. Inconceivable. Well, what was I going to ask you? Are they, is it sort of, you were saying it's sort of Sophia Coppola, you know, kind of tongue in cheek with the period? Like
Yes,
how are
it's
they doing that?
well, without giving sort of
Will the purists go crazy? Will they lose their minds?
yeah, frock flicks are gonna read us to filth, honestly.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
there it was very
I think they liked Marie Antoinette though.
yeah, but it's less period than Marie Antoinette. It's
Oh,
more
okay.
it was very it's I will say the period shapes are there. They're
Hmm.
impeccable. But
Yeah.
a lot of the colors aren't quite right or the fabrics are more stylized and it is beautiful. I'll say it's beautiful, but
Hmm.
it's not period accurate. And there's no like French hoods on any of the leads. There's a lot of just sort of fun
Oh, there's
hairstyles.
the beachy
Um,
waves. The historians hate the beachy waves. Have you
yeah,
heard of that one?
I think there will be some half up, half down 90s
Yeah.
prom kind of
Yeah, I
hair,
know.
potentially.
Well, you know,
But
I'm not a super hard liner when it comes to that. I
no,
think you
that's
know
the
that
thing.
about me. Yeah.
Having read the script, it wouldn't have made sense for them to be in a French hood and a huge ruff. It would not have made any sense because of how irreverent and like teenage and feisty and sexy the script was. So and also the sets were beautiful, incredibly period. And weirdly, when I saw a lot of the on-set photos of like all the actors in their finery, it looked incredible. And in the candlelight, all of the synthetic fabrics that we did use were like glittering beautifully. I think it is going to be incredible, but the purists are going to hate it. But also, a lot of the purists are kind of insane. So we don't pay a lot of attention to what they think when we're on jobs. Generally, we'll laugh and we'll be like, "Oh, this one website or this blog is going to rip us all to pieces." But like, you know, hey ho, what do they know? They're not here. You know, they're not
Yeah,
listening
I
to
know.
all
When
these
I
different
did my
voices.
Bridgerton reaction, and I'd say 50% of the people who watched my video were furious with me. They were like, "This is garbage." And I was
I
like,
mean,
"What are you
it
talking about?" Anyway, yeah.
it's just it's.
Oh, rain. Okay, well, rain. I don't know.
I mean, no,
I did have an issue.
rain is kind of unacceptable. To be fair to me, I think
You know,
rain is a
yeah,
step too far. But
it is.
Bridgerton, I think, is fabulous. And
I think so too.
having worked on the upcoming season, um, it's a very different world. I went straight from one job that was very delicate to then, oh, make a giant flower out of bright coloured feathers. So it was quite freeing and liberating and fun and all of those very campy fabrics and like everyone layering them in different ways was really fun to be a part of. Even for only a couple of weeks, I was only there for a little while, filling someone else's gap. But
Yeah, well, I did a breakdown on striptease, you know, and it's the same costume designer, striptease as Bridgerton, and then now she's gone on to do, she went on to do Oppenheimer. Like, talk about like, you know,
yeah,
such a
I mean,
body of work.
it does happen. I mean, some designers do tend to do the same kind of thing
Mhm.
always. Um, but some designers are very do really wildly different jobs. I mean, just like actors and actresses do. Some people do get typecast or work with one director over and over, and some don't. You know.
Lady Starfell, she said, I think everything beautiful about Marie Antoinette set and acting, just did not like the music, but that SC style. Yeah,
I I get it,
yeah.
but I mean, I get it, but having lived it, shall we say, like having flounced around Versailles at a period ball, it the music there is just something that is so uncannily 1980s about the 18th century in the like decadence, in the irreverence, in the sort of insanity of it all. Um, so I really love the music, and also I'm obsessed with 80s music as a human. So I I love the music choices in that movie, and also there are period opera music. There are period pieces in that movie that set the sort of more mood, you know. But I think they were just going for this crazy, like candy fueled drug trip of what it's like to be teenage and pampered. You know, I think it was very much a cool stylistic choice, really.
Yeah, it's the same with the Great. It's amazing the way that they handle. I mean, and there's so much. It's outrageous. You know, I was like, there's this Grover does this, I think this makeover show on Sesame Street, where he's always like, "It's outrageous," and that's sort of how I feel like some of these shows when you watch them, like you can't take it seriously, like you.
Oh no, and the thing is, TV and film fills a very important gap, especially now. Like there's a war. We've just got over a freaking plague, an unprecedented time of distress for a lot of people, especially in the States, with all of the repeals of just bodily autonomy laws and the trans community being so affected by all these horrible, almost, witch trials-esque laws, that I think film and television fills an incredibly important gap in the collective psyche where we need escapism probably now more than ever. Why are we stressing so much about
that was weird. You just popped off. I don't know what happened there.
that's weird. But why are we worrying about if something's a synthetic fabric when they wouldn't have had it? Like sometimes I think people's comments get a little bit, I personally get a lot of it on historical costuming groups of, "Oh, your makeup is far too intense for this period," or unsolicited comments about the fabric or whatever. And it's kind of like, there's a place for utter accuracy, but also even if you use natural fibers, nothing is going to be the exact same because fabric itself is different to how it was centuries ago. We can't manufacture the quality they did by hand. It's impossible. So I think there's a time and place for utter purism. I mean, productions like Gentleman Jack are incredibly period and stunning, but then there's also place for Bridgerton, but not for Rain.
Yeah, well, actually, when I spoke to Tom Pye about working on Gentleman Jack, and I said to him, like, he still at some point just drew the line and said, I can't possibly, go 100% with historical accuracy. At some point, I have to just say, okay, that I can't do it.
No, you can't. It's impossible with the time that we work to. It is insanity. And
I was watching an interview. I think I told you this because I'm just getting caught up on What We Do in the Shadows, which, by the way, is fantastic. I highly recommend everyone watch it.
It's fabulous.
But one of the things that a lot of times people don't know, the costume designer on that was discussing, there's a wedding in one of the seasons. I don't want to say anything about it in case you haven't seen it, but she was saying that they got the script and they had 10 days to get everything done. So sometimes, as you know, I don't have to explain this to you, but to the audience, that sometimes you're working with crazy deadlines.
Sometimes, and weirdly, it is always the costumes that you think would be the key ones, like a wedding dress, a funeral gown, a big key statement costume, often are the ones that are left later because paradoxically, the more important a costume is, I think the harder it is to design because the more people's opinions you have to include for the sake of, producers, the actor wearing it, the lighting tech, the sound people, sometimes special effects. Like there are so many conversations involved in one costume that it can be very difficult just to actually schedule time in to have these discussions. And then that time ticks away because you're dealing with sometimes 10 departments. Sometimes on one costume, you'll be dealing with a designer, an assistant, a bunch of buyers. You'll be dealing with a cutter, a couple of makers, an embroiderer, a dyer, a printer. So every person is another step in a chain, which adds more time to a discussion. And with products not being as readily available, and you have to order things online, that takes time as well, and you can't get actors for fittings. All of it adds to time, which
and during the pandemic, it was especially difficult, because everything was being done. A lot of it was being done virtually, which I can't even imagine what that would have been like.
It was crazy, and I remember having to do fittings for season 2 of The Nevers in full, actual surgeon hazmat gear. It was insanity.
Sort of how I look at things is I look at it. It has to be, for me, I guess it has to tell the story. The costume has to tell the story and the character. And No, but at the same time, oftentimes I want it to look beautiful too.
Mhm.
So I do find myself sometimes I'm like, okay, where am I coming at this from? Because sometimes, like for instance, I did a video on I really, really hated the costumes. Oh, I've lost my mind. What it is? Was it called now? This show that I did a review on, and one of the characters I couldn't stand her costumes, but at the same time I'm like, but it makes sense to the character. So personally, as a human being, I thought those are just really awful and ugly. But I think it worked for the characters. So I think that as
Mhm,
long as
mhm.
it's like that. But
Yeah,
sometimes,
always.
like for instance, on The Witcher, the last season of The Witcher, I watched that and I was just like, I don't know what's going on here. This is just like kind of looks like it's been thrown together. Um, but that so if you've worked on that, I apologize.
I didn't, but I do know people who did. I think The Witch has got better as we've gone through it. I think the season just gone had some very lovely pieces
Hmm.
in. Actually,
Yeah.
season 3 I think had some very lovely little bits and little details. The armor was my only real problem in season 1. The Nilfgaard armor. As a fan of
Yes.
the game and the book, I was a bit disappointed with
Oh,
that
okay. Yes.
armor.
Yeah. But I spoke
The
to
sort of
Tim about
leathery
that,
wrinkle
and
armor.
I thought he did something really, really different because, like, a lot of times, it's funny. This is, I know you worked on Silo, and I love Silo. My only issue with Silo is it kind of went back to that Asian trope. It's always like the Asian right over left.
Mhm,
Everyone does
mhm,
that. Like, let's do a jacket right over left or left over right or whatever.
mhm.
And it's always that Asian inspired thing. And I was like, for that's one thing I liked about Tim. He went with like sort of a more like I think it was like turn of the century, like 19, I can't remember. He did like the romantic era, I think it was called.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I was like, this is really something different, like we really haven't seen. I'm talking about like Sintra. And then of course Pavetta's green dress, I was like, beyond like I was like losing my mind over how gorgeous it was. I just thought, but I
Yes,
know
it
what you were
is.
saying
It is
about
beautiful.
yeah, I know you were talking about the armor, and I think it was funny because I said, a lot of people had a name for that armor, and I sort of had thought that it was sort of like supposed to be kind of organic, like it's roots
Yes,
and growing
which
out of this.
which which is kind of weird because
Yeah.
Nilfgaard's whole thing is that they're basically like that world's equivalent of like the Nazi Empire. They're
Hmm.
like this rigid faction-esque society. So it was odd, but I will say that those breastplates. There was a similar costume in the background of a TV show called Salem, which was
Oh
designed
yeah, Salem's a
by
great design.
which was stunning. And there's
Hmm.
one warlock who lives in the underground bit under the tree where the witches sort of draw their magic from. And he has a breastplate that you can see, I think, on Instagram and Pinterest. And it's that kind of leather sort of scrunch work, but underneath it, they've used it in such a way that it's shaped around glass red dragon sort of eyes. So the whole doublet is covered in like demon eyes and like demon skin kind of. It's
So
very
cool.
fabulous. So that technique is fabulous, but I think they probably just had to make a million of them in like
Yeah,
a
and
very short
it
time and just
was
had
he
to
said
do something
that's
strong.
exactly what it was. It was exactly he said they weren't allowed to use the video game. They weren't allowed to use anything from the game and because of copyright. And then they had a very short amount of time. So it's one of those like, it's the same with Yennefer's rope dress, which I was like, I liked the concept of it, but it just didn't look right. Like there was
My
something off
problem
about it.
my problem for me with that dress, A, being a performer as well, so a lot of what I wear, I think, how am I moving in it? Um, my problem with that dress wasn't aesthetic. I thought it was cool. My
Mhm.
problem is you're going into the biggest magical battle of your entire life, and you're wearing a dress that can get caught on things, can be magically used to maybe strangle you, or could be grabbed by enemies, or is flammable. Like, that was my problem with it. The logic of wearing that
Yeah,
for
and it actually would have
a
been cool
battle.
in if it had been used someone did use it to try and strangle her and then she
Yeah,
got out of it. That would have
exactly.
actually
Which,
been, but it,
yeah,
it didn't really, yeah, exactly. So back to it doesn't really serve the story.
no, or she's sort of like that one bit in the Nevers where Amalia is wearing her evening gown and then jumps down the stairs and it gets ripped off and she's in her underthings. That could have
Yeah.
happened where she like pulls it off, and there's just a sort of shift underneath that's a lot more battle-y, shall we say.
Well,
I mean, it's
you know what? I'm going to
incredible
have you
look,
back on so we can talk about all these other shows.
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And I did do by the way, everybody, I did do a breakdown on Silo, which I'm actually going to do. I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with it right now. I'm reading the book. So I'm thinking of doing a show versus book comparison because everyone basically wears overalls or coveralls.
Yes. Well, I mean,
in the book.
I didn't work on season 1.
You're on season 2, but you can't say anything.
I've been on season 2 and mainly helping establish the style for the new Silo, which I can't say anything about. But if you've read the books, it's all in the book, you know. So establishing new characters that are from a slightly different world, so the visual language is slightly different. Their culture is slightly different.
I can't talk about it around the house. My husband he says, don't spoil anything for me, because I'm like, oh, I have to tell you this one thing. And he's like, no, you can tell me.
I will say I was very lucky to get to walk around all of the sets a few weeks ago and to walk up the giant staircase, the central staircase. Those sets are probably I did recently when I was on House of the Dragon, I did have a little wander around King's Landing of a lunchtime, you know, as you do. But I will say the sets for Silo were so immersive because it makes you feel underground. They are very claustrophobic and oppressive, but also so like every section of it is full of detail. You don't see any of it on screen. It is honestly fabulous.
I met Hugh Howey, by the way, in Toronto. I have to say, he's probably one of the nicest people you could ever meet. He's so lovely. Yeah, the author. He's a total sweetie. And he's also on Twitter, and he's very like engaged with his fans. So
that's nice to know.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's a bit of a hottie. He's little though. He's kind of little. He's kind of like maybe 5'6", 5'7". He's not super tall, but he's a little hottie.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Maybe you'll run into him. He was a background person on one of the episodes in season 1.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, potentially. I've met a few of the leads, not all of them. Rebecca is incredible. She's such a sweetie. She's a little whirlwind of energy and ideas, and she's fabulous.
And of course, she's going to be in the sequel to what do you call it? That you guys have to help me out. I've lost it in my brain. I saw the first part. What's the big movie? Oh, Dune. Sorry. Yeah, she's going to be in part 2 of Dune. Too short for me. He's actually, his wife is gorgeous. He got remarried, so he's got like a hot, like sexy model type wife or whatever. But so Casta Hex. Now, can I just call you Casta? Like, or do you go by Hex, or what do you go by?
Yeah, Cassie. Cassie's fine.
Cassie. Okay. So Cassie, I would love to have you back. If you ever, we can just have chat kind of thing, or we can maybe think about some things we want to talk about.
Absolutely.
But anyway, before I let you go, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you and the best way to get a hold of you if they want to?
Yeah. I mean, my best place is Instagram. I'm on there as Casta_Hex, CASTA_HEX. I'm also on TikTok under the same. I'm on Facebook as Casta Hex as well. I do have a YouTube, but I don't actually make anything for it. It's just where I sort of, comment on things. So, I'm reachable on all of my social media. Instagram is my best one. And honestly, as many followers as I can sort of claw to that page would be fabulous.
I'm hoping maybe when you come back, you would try to do an impression of Last Love for me from what they do in the shadows.
I don't know
if you've got. I'm terrible with accents, but it sounds like you have a similar type London style accent to Laszlo.
Well, I'm from Essex, but Laszlo's voice is somewhere a bit like Nadia, my sweet, like that.
My darling. He was called her. Yeah, so maybe next time you come back.
Let's do gay things.
I know.
Gay is where it's at.
Yeah, it's just such a great show.
Yeah, I can actually. My best impression from What We Do in the Shadows is from the original movie. Have you seen the original movie?
Oh yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. It is 6 p.m. in the nighttime, and that's when we wake up.
Is that Taika? That's Taika Waititi.
Yes, yeah, his
Yeah.
character. What is it? What is it? He says he's like, there's a whole lot of it's a spinal column, yuck. Like
Yeah.
he's hilarious in that movie.
I love him. Like I saw that movie because my husband got into was it Flight of the Conchords, and we
Mhm.
started
Yeah.
watching them, and then we found this movie, and it was so funny because I saw them talking about the TV show, and they said basically they invited some of their friends over to their apartment to make this little independent film, and they were even doing crowdsourcing and stuff like to try and get the film going,
Oh, I
right?
remember. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, Nandor is totally hot. And so they said whoever showed up basically were the ones who ended up in the film because someone said, "Well, why wasn't there a female vampire?" And they said, "Well, we invited people over, but no females showed up." So basically, they ended up
Mm.
just with the guys.
I will never not find the line funny. Vampires don't do dishes. I will never not
Yes.
find that funny. I quote that so much. Like
Yeah.
I quote the whole everything so much. My friend and I are very obsessed with Nadia specifically,
Oh
and
yeah.
like I would love to have a possessed doll that is possessed with my own previous reincarnation that I could like shoot the shit with.
Yes. Well, she
That
even
would
has
be
the doll and the logo of her nightclub, like I don't know if you
yeah,
noticed that,
yeah, I
but
did. It was
there's
so
this one outfit
so
she
good.
wears in season 4. It's basically like a body stocking or something, but it's covered in sequins. And there's this one scene where she climbs up on the stage and she falls into the drums. Like, have you seen season 4?
I've seen it. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my god, that outfit! I was like, "What
I
is with that
I
outfit?"
think my favorite one was her like 1890s meets 1830s tartan like Christmas kind of fabric.
Yes, totally.
And
Uh,
there's one that she wears that's like chevron, acid green, and black that I'm obsessed with.
oh, okay. I'm gonna
Um,
have to.
I don't know what season. I think that's 4. Um,
Yeah.
I was really excited personally as a pagan and stuff when they introduced witches in whatever season that was, and
Mhm.
that witches' motivation was their entire thing was they wanted to steal vampire semen. I thought that was
And they had that tool, which was funny because I think there was a tool like that in True Blood, and there's witches in True Blood. Have you seen True
mm,
Blood?
I have seen True Blood,
Yeah.
and actually, as a pagan, um, witches are misrepresented in everything.
Oh, of
Like
course.
the actors are like when they cast a spell, it's like less channeling and energy and more just like saying a line. But the actress who is Aunt Petunia in Harry Potter, who plays Marnie in True Blood, the way she casts her spells, I just believe it. I think
Mhm.
she's the best representation of a spell cast I've ever
Oh,
seen
really? Oh,
on
that's
anything. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Mm.
Before I let you go, I have to just tell you, like, so my husband's from this area of Ontario called Prince Edward County, and
Mm.
they have like, like every Saturday, Sunday, they have their market, like a little market, farmer's market
Mm.
kind of thing. Oh, hey, Stephanie, we're just wrapping up, but you'll have to come back because Cassie's going to come back for another live stream soon, hopefully.
I'd love that.
Um, but anyway, so I went and they had this one vendor was selling brooms that they made out of like, I don't know if it's like reclaimed wood.
Mm, mm.
They were so gorgeous. And I said to my husband, my mother-in-law, she's moving into like a granny's flat or whatever, like,
Granny Annex, yeah.
granny
Mhm.
annex. So she's got this new home, and I always believe you should get a new broom when you move into a new home or
Absolutely.
whatever. So I
Mhm.
said I wanted to go get her. So my husband's like, "Well, what is she going to fly away on?" Like, I am like, "Well, no, that's what the vacuum cleaner's for." No,
Yes,
she
I mean the Roombas. I mean,
the Roombas.
I have two brooms, but I've always wanted one that's made in America because you guys use the broom corn, right?
Yes, that's
Not,
what it is. Yeah.
but we use in England we use like hazel twigs,
Oh,
and
okay.
they're quite a different thing. They're a lot scratchier, you know. And I've
Yes.
always wanted one of the traditional like American ones that's like the classic witch shape, but made of the
Yeah.
like corn, rather than the twigs that we
Well,
have.
that's
But
what these are.
you know, yeah,
But what's so cool is that the pole, which is usually just a straight wood pole, is actually kind of twisted because
I
they've
love
used
that.
like reclaimed wood or something. So
Mm.
next time I go, I'm going to go down there in a few weeks. I'll take a couple of pictures to
Oh,
show
I'd love
you.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, you haven't heard that, Carl? Yeah. I don't know. It's probably an old wives' tale, but it's like you're not supposed to bring an old broom from your old
Yeah,
house.
like your like if you buy someone a purse or a wallet, you're not supposed to give it to them empty. You have to put at least a penny in it so that it's not empty, because otherwise it like curses them with always having an empty wallet.
Yeah, but even just from a practical level, I like the idea of not bringing an old dirty broom into your new house.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, there's
Yeah,
a lot of weird legends about
for
brooms,
sure.
like jumping over it for fertility and
Yeah.
all those kind of things. So they're quite storied objects.
Yeah. Well, this has been so much fun. I've had such a blast
Thank
having you
you.
here.
Yeah,
And
I'm very honored to be here.
and hopefully you don't feel too warm. Like I'm actually warm because I'm in downstairs and there's no air conditioning. So hopefully you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, my
No, I mean,
you're
I'm used
comfortable.
to it. I'm used to it. So in literally 5 minutes, all of this will be off, and I'll be in pajamas cleaning makeup brushes. Like,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah,
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for everybody who came. We had lots of great questions, lots of
yeah,
interaction. That was so fabulous.
absolutely.
And if you did come in late and you do want to come back and watch this, it will be on the replay as soon as we're finished. And also for you, Cassie, if you want to watch this after, you'll be able to do that.
Thank you.
So thanks again, everyone, for coming. And as I mentioned, Cassie's all of her contact info is in the description below, so you can find her on Instagram. Is the best
I would
place.
love that. I would love
Yeah,
that.
so go over and follow her. That would be so great.
Thank you so much.
And then for sure we'll have you back. Okay. Well, thanks
I'd love
everyone.
that. Okay.
Have a lovely evening. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm ending the broadcast.